And I'm telling you, be prepared for a major attack. But it won't be Osama bin Laden. It will be those behind the New World Order.
They are controlling you through a matrix, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bohemian Grove, the Trilateral Commission, systems of control. Welcome back, patriots and truth seekers, and we are sorry it took so long for another video. As promised, though, we bring the video that we said we would bring you, a video exposing the Federal Reserve. We also brought back the man who started this channel for this video. He's the one that all those years ago created this channel to expose the corrupt forces that control this country. Back then the channel was called Temple of Hidden Truth. Now all these years later he comes back to this channel to help us illuminate the darkness. Welcome back, our friend, X.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for welcoming me back to this channel.
Before the Federal Reserve Act, the United States dollar was indeed backed by the precious metal, gold, even though dollar coins were often made from silver. Over the time that the United States dollar was backed by gold, you could say it all began in 1775. America decided to break away from the oppressive British monarchy. There are many reasons that the Americans decided to break from Britain. But one could say was the ban of interest-free currency that the Americans had came up with. It was the currency the colonies had come up with themselves to pay for goods and services. In 1783 America was finally free, but their battle with a centralized banking system began. In the very Constitution of the U.S. it says only Congress has the ability to create and destroy currency.
Before the Act of 1913, Congress was the only people that had the ability to create and destroy currency. The Federal Reserve is not federal at all. The American forefathers warned people of what would happen if we had a centralized banking system ran by private banking cartel, aka private bankers.
By the early 20th century America had already implemented and then abolished several centralized banking systems. Around this time powerful men like J.D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Paul Warburg, and Baron Rothschild wished to once again institute a centralized banking system. A system not ran by the United States government like the Constitution, but a system ran by them and those they served. In order to carry out their agenda they used the influence to orchestrate several banking crises to make it seem like that the financial institution could not survive without the system they wished to place. And their plans succeeded. Many banks panicked and began calling in loans and collapsing, creating an economic disaster just like these men planned. This led to a commission led by Nelson Aldrich, who had ties to the bankers and the powerful we previously mentioned. Some of these men were bankers and some were powerful men that would become what we now today know as the Deep State and the Illuminati. You could say these men were some of the first members. Yes, the Illuminati Deep State began in 1776 and then supposedly died off. It came back though, but first without naming themselves the Illuminati or even the Deep State. Aldrich would later become a chairman for the Rockefeller Foundation. Obviously because of what he would help create that would benefit these men. Aldrich stated there should a private centralized banking system in order to prevent a panic like the 1907 panic. He, the men we previously mentioned, a few others met on Jekyll Island to create what would become known as the 1913 Federal Reserve Act.
In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge, that the 10 or so figures who attended were told they could only use their first names in addressing each other. After this bill was constructed, it was then handed over to their political frontman, Senator Nelson Aldrich, to push through Congress. And in 1913, with heavy political sponsorship by the bankers, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign support. And 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson in turn made it law. Years later, Woodrow Wilson wrote, in regret,
The people were told that the Federal Reserve was to ensure that economic crises were things of the past. As history has shown, that is far from the truth. They had now had the ability to control and destroy the economy at will. They had already years before seized control over the rest of the world through the International Monetary Fund. Through that group they controlled majority of the economies of the world. And now through the Federal Reserve they had complete control over our economy. Corporations and businesses now have no other choice than to play by the rules these bankers make. The government had no power anymore. The Federal Reserve is and was in complete control. From 1914 to 1919 the Fed increased the money supply and then at its peak called back all that money. This in turn caused the Great Depression.
Of course, after Louis McFadden said this particular quote that you just saw on your screen, he was assassinated by poisoning before the people involved could be impeached. It was then at this very point that they decided that everybody living in squalor after the Great Depression of 1929, that was not good enough. Instead, they decided that they needed to rid the world of the gold standard, and in order to do that, they seized up all the gold. And that's what led to the Presidential Gold Act of 1933. In order to supposedly stop the Great Depression, the gold was seized up by the U.S. government.
And after 1933 the gold standard was abolished. If you look at a bill before 1933 it says it's redeemable in gold. If you take a look at one after 1933 it says that this legal tender is for debts public and private. The more money there is the more debt there is. The less money there is the less debt. They have created a debt system that we are all slaves to. The amendment was never ratified and it is against the Constitution. Article I, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution lists most of what is commonly referred to as the enumerated powers of Congress. Among them are the power to borrow money on behalf of the United States and the power to coin money, establish currency and determine its value. The Constitution makes no reference to a centralized bank to carry out these actions. The 10th Amendment also states the federal government is only to have those powers expressly granted to it. Therefore the creation of the Federal Reserve itself was a violation of the Constitution.
In addition, the Federal Reserve is not at all federal. It's not even part of the federal government. It's no more federal than Federal Express, Federated Department Stores. It's a private corporation with a legislative monopoly on currency and the credit that is allowed to buy its paper currency for nothing more than the cost of the paper, ink, and labor from the Bureau of Printing and Engraving. Originally this added up to 2.3 cents per note, with 230 of cost to buy $1 million. Because of the existence of the Federal Reserve Bank and fractional reserve banking system, America is now without any permanent money supply at all. The Federal Reserve is just not even federal. It is a deliberate violation of the United States Constitution and was deliberately created to completely control the United States and its people.
The Federal Reserve has never been audited. The Fed has never answered to anyone. There is no committee to make sure the money they have is going where they are saying. They have unlimited power. The wool has been pulled over our eyes. Income tax, for instance, is in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution as well, yet we allow it. People are not supposed to be taxed for the income they earn. The Federal Reserve is one of the systems of control I am always talking about. I would like to thank X for being with us today. I hope for him to come back to be in another video in the future. As always, thank for watching. Stay informed.